Hey guys, Kevin here with Honey Badger. We're getting ready to put on the APR wing, or airfoil, however you want to call it. But I originally did an intro for this video, and apparently my battery died right after start. So, starting here. We got the APR GT-250 Wing that we're putting on the GT350 here. I have a new trunk lid. Well, I should say I bought a trunk lid off of eBay, and I had it repainted at a local body shop. I'd say all in, it's been around $1,100 for just the trunk lid, which is pretty crazy. It's got a little bit more expensive than I thought. So a little bit of a tangent, but I would probably look to either buying a brand new trunk lid from AutoNation Ford or something like that, White Bear Lake, I think, or maybe going the carbon fiber route and having that painted. It won't really be that much more. Now, granted, that $1,100 does include a ruby red paint job, which is more expensive, so keep that in mind. So this trunk lid had no holes on the top. I've gone ahead and drilled 2 pilot holes. The APR instructions say the first step is to drill your first hole through the middle of this guy here. This is a factory hole, but the actual top trunk lid, if you've bought a trunk that did not previously have a spoiler on it, will come. Now, the APR instructions basically say stick your drill bit in the middle here and drill through it. And that's pretty much what I did. I took a little bit of caution as much as I could, but I guess you could build a jig if you want to be ultra precise, but honestly, if you take your time and you eyeball it, you'll get pretty good. I drilled very, very small. I think these are like, I want to say 5/32 holes, maybe 1/8 holes that I drilled just to get a pilot. The actual hole for the bolts are 1/4 inch, so if you're off by a little bit, you can adjust the drill as needed. Fortunately, these are exactly 44 inches apart per the APR instructions, and they seem to be equal from the point up here to the point down here, and etc. So I'm happy with them, so I'm going to roll with them. So the next thing you do is you take this guy here. You can actually take the carbon fiber piece that sits on top of the trunk lid too, but this is just the gasket for it. But you line this up with the hole that you just drilled in the center on both sides, and then you essentially square it up. So you make sure you got 44 inches from this hole to the one over there, and then 44 inches from the top hole to the one over there. Then you mark your locations, and then you drill down through drill down with your 1/4 inch drill bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, so it looks like we're ready to drill here. What I did is I took the existing holes and I enlarged them to 1/4 inch once I verified that they're in the right spot. And then I covered the rest of this in tape so I could put this directly on top and slide it around, not worry about scratching up the paint. I then took one of the bolts that will actually come up through the bottom and stuck it through the top here to help align this plate and get it in the right general spot. I did the same over there. And then I played around them until I got them in the right position, and that this hole and that hole, the distance is 44, the middle holes are 44, and the rear holes are still 44 inches exactly. Just for reference, the distance from the edge of the trunk lid here and the edge of the bracket is about 2 inches and 5/8. It will probably be different on your own trunk lid if you're doing your own install, but just for a general reference point of maybe where to start, that's where I landed. So next thing I did is I I marked little tiny marks in here with a pencil that I will then go and drill with the 1/4 inch. So I'm going to pull these off, drill through with the 1/4 inch drill bit on the 2 most forward holes of the bracket, and then we'll actually get the supports from the wing over there, and we will mount the bracket in, and we'll tackle those next steps. All right, got the 3 holes drilled. One of the things I recommend doing before you put if you're following along doing an install yourself, the things I recommend doing before you actually install through the trunk lid is putting some touch-up paint in the holes. This will seal the bare metal, which will help prevent rust. While this is a race car, we'll spend most of its time either in the garage or out on a sunny racetrack, or hopefully moderately sunny. I don't foresee leaking or a problem having these unpainted, but it's just a good measure to take just in case, especially since I also really don't expect it because there's a nice giant rubber gasket on the bottom of this, but just a good measure. So while that's drying, I'm going to then assemble the bottom here of the bracket. or the pedestal, I think is what APR calls it. So we have 3 holes down here, and I believe it's the front 2, the one there and there, use a stud, and then the back one has this bolt that I was using earlier come up through the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, just like in the picture here, I'm going to install these 2 studs, and because I want to make sure they don't ever come back out, I'm going to use some blue Loctite. Alright, time to put the pedestal onto the car. I've already done that side to get a feel for what it's like. It can be a little tricky to line up the holes correctly, and you'll see why here in a minute, but this is what it looks like on this side. There's the support bracket underneath here, and then there's this distribution plate back here, this backing plate that helps squeeze here. Just to give you an idea, the first step is actually to take this guy and slide it in through here, and you're supposed to slide this through until it pops up in the hole over here, like so, about there. And this is to give you something to ratchet down on, so as you squeeze these 2 surfaces together, they don't compress. This, unfortunately, while it does have a gap, you aren't able to get anything in there. So what they do is they give you that plate that helps at least distribute the force across a greater area and reduce the amount of stress on the bit. So I'm going to go ahead and install that other one. It's fairly simple. You just take the pedestal here, you stick it in, and then they recommend before you tighten down the studs here with nuts, you actually do the bolt through here at the top, or back if you want. So I'm gonna go do that now. Hey guys, so it's actually been a little bit of time, probably about 3 weeks since I shot the original part of the video. For whatever reason, when I went to go start editing it, I realized that I didn't have it. Or I didn't have what happened past the point you saw to. So I'm doing this after the fact, so don't mind the changes and how some things look a little bit different on the car. I'll go into those in more detail after I've had more time with the car on track. But until then, I just wanted to quickly recap some things. I upgraded the hardware here. I just went to a bigger washer. So I felt like the washers that came with the APR kit, which were very small and not much bigger than the nuts here, they were digging into the carbon fiber when I tightened things down, and I just wasn't comfortable with that. So I recommend upgrading your washers here. Make it double checking that you're Loctiting these down. So once we got this installed, then it was time to actually install the wing on top of the pedestals, and that was fairly straightforward. These guys actually were caved in this direction a bit, so it was a little bit of a squeeze to get this thing in. So if you run into that same problem, just know that I had the same thing. I started with the top bolts back here for both sides, and then slid the front down, and I started on the first hole here and the first hole here, and that equaled, I think it was about 3 degrees of angle of attack for me when I measured it. Now that depends, the actual angle depends on how you measure and where you measure, so I'm just letting you know, I'm not saying for sure it's that way. So once you get that locked down, and then the last step I did was install the sides here with the supplied bolts. No changes other than the hardware I used on the underside here for that carbon fiber plate, backing plate. I just upgraded the size here because, like I said, I felt like that was a little under spec'd. Everything else is the same I used. Just make sure if the nuts you're using don't have Loctite on them, add some Loctite. All right, guys, let's cut to some slow-mo shots. If you have any questions about your build, if you're doing something similar or you're thinking about it, just shoot me a quick comment or message or anything like that, and I'll get back to you. All right, thanks, guys.